Hey everybody, welcome back to the Take a Stand online conference, a 4-day event where I am speaking with 35 incredible women who are all sharing their unique experience of triumph over trauma. So this could be some abuse that they have experienced in their life, and they're going to share how they've navigated their way out of difficult situations, in the hope that it will inspire you to maybe think of things differently, to take an action it is that you can do to move yourself forward, but ultimately to let you know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So for my YouTube family, please give the video a thumbs up. It's great that you have come back and joined us to listen to Loraine talk about her lived experience. But remember, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do go ahead and subscribe now if you feel that this channel is going to be a good fit for you. So over to you, Loraine. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me here.
Let's get stuck into the most fascinating and the best part of it all, as far as I'm concerned, and that is if you could let us know about a personal story of triumph over trauma that you would be happy to share and let us know about.
Well, I've actually experienced a lot of small events that I really didn't consider as massive traumas at the time that the events happened, but looking back, it all adds up, sort of little bits that add up as you're going along. So I've had 3 relationships in my lifetime where I've had long-term relationships, and my first relationship, I was married, and I had my 2 daughters in that relationship. And then I had a relationship where I wasn't married, and my final one, again, the 3rd relationship, I wasn't married. And, you know, what I've been through, what I call it, is my 3 Ds of relationship endings. Because on the first relationship, it was my choice, basically. I thought it'd be better to separate, so we got divorced. So that's 1 D. And the second relationship, unfortunately, my partner, we just started a business together in the city where I was living, student rental accommodations and things. And we'd only just started that business in 2005. And unfortunately, by the Christmas of 2006, my partner had a heart attack and died. So that was another day, a death. And then my 3rd long-term relationship just ended in the lockdown in 2020. And I consider that was an abrupt termination of a relationship because I wasn't expecting it. So that I call a discard. So 3 days in relationship endings: divorce, death, discard. And of all 3, I know that people can go through all sorts of things with divorces, but of all 3, the worst one I've ever experienced, even though I lost my partner through a heart attack and it was very sudden, was the last relationship, the discard, because that wasn't expected. And when it happened, at first I thought, right, okay, life's going to be fine, everything's going to be okay, I can get through all of this, yeah? And then things sort of changed very quickly, from him saying wanting an amicable end to the relationship. And then all of a sudden it wasn't amicable, and I was being threatened, and I didn't feel that it was going in a good direction. And basically, as soon as he left, I was then threatened through his emails and triggered, and I was threatened with legal action and eviction. It was within 2 weeks of him leaving me in Spain and him then returned to the UK. And that was where the trauma came in, because once I read through the emails, and looked at everything that was written in there, I realised, because he was then blaming me for everything, I was the person at fault, even though the way he ended our relationship was so sudden. And I realised that it was an immature way to end a relationship, and also a cowardly way. Of things that he did was very cowardly. It's like he couldn't face up and speak face to face. So it was very traumatic at that point. And in the last 2 years, I've had to live through knowing that my partner wasn't really the man that I thought I'd met at the start of the relationship. And him telling me in emails that he'd never loved me, and there was lots of other things that triggered the situation. And it's been a massive sort of journey, ups and downs, but I think it took me 8 months from him leaving to actually start to feel better. And I know that you go through grief, and you have to sort of go through all of these different emotions as you're going through the grief. Even anger, which I did have. I really felt angry at some stages. Then you've got your sadness, but you're trying to get out of all of that grief process. And I think by the April of 2021, it was when I was sort of coming out of that, and I'd made some decisions for myself. I was like, what can I actually do? And it was at that point that I actually thought, right, I'm going to write this book. But at the same time, I was actually invited to write a chapter for a collaborative book. And I'd never written anything before in my life, right? Never. But had an idea that I wanted to write a book when I was much younger, right? And I never got around to doing it. So anyway, I thought, okay. And I did put together a chapter for this collaborative book. Now, that book was focused on mental illness, and it was called, Faces of Mental Illness, right?
Nice.
And so I basically wrote a chapter, but the chapter that I wrote wasn't anything to do with the experience that I'd just had or the relationship that had just ended. I jumped back to when I was 27 years old and the relationship when I was married. And I jumped back to that, and my children were very young. And I had what the doctors were saying is a nervous breakdown. And I was actually in medical emergency and admitted to hospital. So I wrote my story, and it was published in that book. In December 2021, it was published, and it went bestseller 2 days later, I think it was. So that was where I started write the chapter in April of 2021, and I actually wrote my outline for my book, which I published in May of 2022. It took 14 months to actually write, to get it out of my system. And because, to be honest, what I wanted to do was raise awareness of hidden emotional abuse. Because I only realised after the end of that relationship that I've just come out of that, there was manipulation and there was humiliation, very critical of things that I did, and lack of support in what I wanted to do, and lots of tiny little things. Now, since I've researched this subject and wrote the book of my story, I've realised that some people call this where you get small things that happen over a space of time in a relationship. They sort of liken it to death by 1,000 cuts, because you can't see it happening. People outside of the relationship might think, well, that wasn't very nice, or that's not very respectful, or that's disrespectful, and they can see things, but you're that close to them and you have a love for the person that you just basically brush any bad behavior, comments, verbal abuse, you can just brush it away and ignore like any red flags in a relationship. You can ignore it and you just put it to one side. But then when it happens again, I mean, you just upset. You know, you could be really sad about what happened, but then there isn't any it's like you try to get a feedback, or you've caused this hurt or you've caused grief, and you try to explain the situation to that person, and they get angry. They come back with anger because they try to shut you down. They don't want you to say whatever it is you want to say at that point, because I think it's they feel ashamed and maybe guilty about the situation that they caused a person grief, caused a person emotional distress, and they know that they've caused that person that harm, that damage, that hurt. So when I was in that relationship and trying to speak out and say, you know, are we going to have a relationship? Are we going to move forward? What are we going to do? And trying to get feedback, it wasn't good, because all I got back was verbal abuse and anger every time I tried. So that meant basically then I knew then I was trapped, and I felt trapped in a relationship. And I know lots and lots of women get in this position because they end up dependent. Even if they have been independent and had a career or a business or whatever, in these relationships where there's hidden emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and quite often physical as well and sexual as well can happen, quite often the women can end up being dependent because the man in a relationship wants to be in control. He needs the power, he needs the control, and he wants to have a submissive woman who's just going to look after his every need. And that is what the relationship dynamic can end up being. The thing is, I wasn't that type of woman. And I was, obviously everybody since this thing has happened, you're a strong person, you know, and you know, and I was an independent businesswoman, and I was leading a good life back in my hometown in the UK. And since moving here and being in Spain, and I let the business go because I sold it and I wanted to do another type of business, and I wanted to launch myself into online business and be able to make an independent income, I very quickly realised that I was shelving the plans, my ideas, and putting them on the back burner all of the time. Basically because I didn't feel that in the relationship wasn't supportive, and I couldn't move forward. And I kept on sort of holding myself back. So that's how I realised, and researching all of the emotional abuse, coercive control, all of that, where I've looked at everything to sort of understand where I've come from, where I've been, and how it impacted my life at the end of this relationship. And I realised that sometimes men in relationships can sabotage your earning, your job, your independence, and you don't realise it's happening at the time. And it's only till the end of the relationship that you realise what's gone on and what's happened.
What do you think are some of the red flags then that people can think about?
Well, in my case, I realised that he was quite negative quite a lot of the time. So negative mindset around all sorts of different issues. And I know that he had depressive bouts, addictions, alcohol, drugs, and the big one, which is sex. So red flags, continual cheating in relationships, not wanting to commit to a relationship. So that is one. And mental illness, depression, addictions is another.
So how, so addiction and mental illness, because I can imagine when you, I mean, I have my moments, have bouts of mental illness. What would, besides the mental illness, what would be some of the things that people really need to be mindful of? So a bit more specific, I think, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. So basically it would be verbal abuse, where someone can then have anger outbursts, really angry, and say things that are not nice and put you down. Devaluations, basically, is like a way of he's the powerful person, he's on top and needs to put you down, put you in your place. So as you go through the relationship, you don't realize it's happening, but there is more criticism and verbal abuse. There can be outbursts every now and again, but then you just put that down. I mean, I can say examples like driving the car, for example. You're driving the car and you know where you're going to go, and you are going in this direction to get to the destination, right? And then all of a sudden, you've gone the wrong way. And I'm thinking, well, I'm driving the car, yeah? But then they say, no, you've gone the wrong way. So when you obviously know there's more than one way to get there. There's like, you could go one route, another route. So I'm taking a different route. But for him, it was like, no, you're going the wrong way. You should have gone this way. This is a better way to go.
Criticism.
I'm being told I'm doing this wrong. So then the next time I would go on that same journey to go to that same destination, and I would leave the house and he was sitting in the car with us, it was like, I would say, which way do you want us to go? Right? Thinking, well, I'll please him. I'll ask him the question. I want to please him. I don't want to go down one route and I'm going to drive that way and then get criticised for that. So I'll ask him the question. But then it would come back, what are you asking me for? You can't win. You can't win. And then another one is like where you can't win. Another example was, I have lots of ideas, right? Lots of ideas. I'm a very entrepreneurial person. So I can have an idea and then I can take an action on it. He used to always say, you rush headlong into these decisions. You rush headlong into this decision. Well, I've been a businesswoman, so I know that if you've got an idea and you want to do something, you do. That's what you do. You just think, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. And so you get on and you think, right, I'm doing it. But then at the same time, right, if he wanted to do something, he was asking me questions about things, I was always on the porch of indecision. So I was rushing headlong into decisions, or I was always on the porch of indecision. So you can't really win. So, and I didn't see it. But there was little tiny little things that would have been said. It's like when I started an online business once, and there was some atmosphere, and it was really bizarre because we had friends staying but it was in that the day after the Brexit result. Unfortunately, our friends had voted for one way, and we had obviously voted for the other way. So there was a little bit of
tension. Put it nicely.
A little bit of tension going on. So I'm trying to work how to be the bridge in the middle of everything between the couple and like my partner, and I'm thinking, okay. So I'd made some sales in an online business that I'd started. I was doing Amazon online, yeah. And I thought, oh, and I had my iPad, and I thought, great, I'll go over and I'll say, here, look, I've made sales in my business today. So I like to bring him into the conversation, because he was sitting by himself. He was sitting alone. He'd helped himself for wine and food and never even asked anybody in the room, did they want, ask, do you want a glass of wine? Nothing. It just basically got him sat down and started drinking the wine and eating his food. And I'm like, oh, no. Anyway, when I go over to show him the sales, he just looked straight at me and said, this is important because, and this is good because, this is important because, and that was it. And I just sort of stopped and looked, and I thought, what? Why has he said that? But it really got into me. I'm thinking that. And I walked away and I sat down. And as I sat down, I had my iPad in my hands, and the couple were sitting opposite. And the tears just started to flow then. The tears were coming through. And I opened my iPad, and it was the first ever journal entry. I opened a note and I started writing a journal entry, and I titled it, Dear Diary. And then I started writing while the tears were streaming down my face. And like, that is some of the what I've put into the book that I've wrote was some of the diary entries. So like when things happened, I would write, Dear Diary. And I actually wrote back then in, when was it, 2016, I think. I actually wrote, it feels like emotional abuse. The way you talk to me and the way I'm blamed for things. I actually wrote it down in 2016. But I still didn't even understand at that point when I'm writing that down in the journal. I never ever thought. I mean, it was a massive trauma for me to think, like, at the end of it. But oh, you just went off screen there for a minute. That stopped. So that was when the relationship ended. That was the massive trauma. Looking back and then thinking, what sort of a relationship have I been in? What sort of man have I been in a relationship with? And that was how I ended up writing the book.
It became a little bit choppy. I don't know if you remember, but can you backtrack 30 seconds?
30 seconds back.
I can't remember what I did a minute ago, but don't tell anyone.
I can't remember. I was saying about the diary entries, because I was suffering sort of, I was crying, I was upset, and I was like, why did he say that? What's he saying that for? And I was writing in my diary, and I even wrote in that diary at that point, it feels like emotional abuse and bullying, the way you talk to me. So I was like pouring it out into my electronic notepad. And some of those actually are now in my book, because I found the diary things where I was writing Dear Diary to help myself, basically.
Yeah, great little tool.
And the other thing that I did after I came out of the grief period, I decided to start doing affirmations and looking at I am statements and all the forgiveness affirmations and things like that. So I started a YouTube channel, and and it's called Life Change Plans. because I had a website with that name, and I decided, okay, I'm going to put that. And I started the website, and I started a YouTube channel, and I just started doing articles, and then I started researching for the book. And I've met a lot of women in Twitter space who have been through very similar experiences, who were still, some of them still trapped, but unable to get out of it, because the alternative to what they're in is worse. Because I've spoken to a woman who's disabled. She tried to leave. She got some support. She was like put into a sort of housing situation for women, and she says that was worse than being abused in a relationship. And she says it was, I don't know, but I can't describe it, but obviously not good for her. And I think it affects your mental health 10 times worse if you know the situation isn't what you want to be in.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult for women to get over the trauma, to get through everything, because quite a lot of the time I've heard women's refuges and things like that. There's a lot of women who are suffering with mental health issues. They get addicted, they succumb to alcohol and drugs and things like that. So their life, instead of growth, spirals down because of the addictions and the drugs, and they're numbing themselves in order to forget the pain of the past. So really, I haven't got a business. I don't have any sort of thing that I help women with, but I know that in my book I do talk about how I research.
What's your book called, Loraine? You've got a copy there, haven't you?
I have got a copy here. I've published it this year, and it's post-separation abuse, betrayal, abandonment, what type of man. The reason of what type of man, I shall have to just tell this really quickly, because when I had lost my partner through the heart attack, it was 2 years after, and I decided, right, and I would like to attract another man into my life, and I'm all in for the law of attraction in the universe and all of this. So I actually sat down in my office and wrote out what type of man, and then wrote out some things of like, because this was January 2009, and I always do something around just after New Year. And so I wrote out this thing, and I was like, want a kind, generous, caring businessman. I want to be able to go 2-3 holidays a year. And I was writing all of these things on this piece of paper. By the time it was like, I think it was 3 months later, because my birthday's in March, and so I actually met, right, online. And everything that I'd wrote down was the man I attracted into my life, because the kind, generous businessman, and everything that we did, start a relationship, he was very generous with gifts. We went on holidays, and we did do 2 to 3 holidays a year. And so I did attract the man that I wrote down, but I missed out a few things. Be careful what you wish for, because I missed out a few things. And I missed out someone who was ready and able and willing to commit to a long-term relationship. Someone who was, who wouldn't cheat. Someone healthy in body and mind.
Big things.
I missed out, so you have to be very careful. But anyway, I did put the what type of man, it's the last chapter. If you get through the trauma and you want to recover and you're looking to start a new relationship once you've got all your trauma out and you're healed, then be careful what you write down for what you want to attract into your life, and make sure you put healthy in body and mind.
Knowing what you know now, knowing what you know now, what would you say to your younger self?
Well, apart from, it's best to stay single and enjoy your life, but no, really, don't put your plans, dreams, ideas on the back burner for anybody. because if you've got ideas of a business or any, even if it's just to write a book or write a number of books or poetry or art or anything, never dim it and put your life on the back burner for someone else. So when you get married, know that whatever you still want to do it. Because at the end of the day, your life isn't, you've only got one life and you've got to live it. And I've got some regrets that I didn't do what I should have done back when I was married, because I did have ideas and I did want to do things, but I didn't, because I always held back and think, no, well, he's the man and he's providing, and why should he, because I had ideas. I wanted to be a property investor. And that was back before there is even any buy-to-let mortgages available. I wanted to sort of start and rent a house out and have another property that we would live in. And that was an idea I had. I don't know where it would have been if I'd actually got that off the ground. But so that is never go dampen what you want to do. Go for your dreams, go for your plans and your ideas.
Yeah, I like that. Life will always look very different if you follow what it is that you want to do. And, if your partner should support you in that.
Yes.
And accept that that's part of you. If they want you to grow, if they, it should just be a natural thing to do. Should be encouraged on both sides.
On both sides.
You've got
supporting the person and saying, yeah, I'm supporting you, I'm making sure you're fine. And then on the other side, it should be reciprocated. But when it isn't reciprocated, that's where you've got issues.
Yeah. You move into stagnant territory then, I think.
Yeah.
You can't. It's so important that we keep growing, that we keep moving forward, that we're forever expanding and looking for those opportunities and possibilities. And I think when they're being closed down, there's a problem.
That's it.
I mean, it might be that the problem can be resolved, but it might mean that it's the red flag for a much bigger issue.
Yeah, well, when you're in a relationship and the person shuts you down and you're not able to speak, because every time you try to say something or you give some advice and think, well, look, we could do this, or if we do this that way, but then you just get verbal abuse back, then you can't really have a conversation any longer. And that's what happened at the end of the relationship. I was told, you can't negotiate with me. And at the end of a relationship, what do? You're meant to really negotiate and think, right, okay, we end in a relationship, if we can talk about it and end things amicably, it would be really good. But if one person just says, you can't negotiate with me, and then you're shut up, you can't say anything after that because it shut you down. You can't negotiate anything. What you're left with, it's his way or the highway, and that's it.
Well, Loraine, thank you very much for sharing your story and your book. That's awesome. Okay. Is it Amazon that people can pick it up on?
It's on all the digital platforms worldwide,
awesome.
And it's on Kindle and Amazon. Yeah.
Brilliant. So please do pick it up. It could be helpful, not just for your relationship, but also if you've got friends who are experiencing something similar, because we all know someone who knows someone who knows someone, or maybe more than one. But Loraine, thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I love listening to people's stories and what it is they've experienced and how they have come back through the other side. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.